Hey guys, I didn't really feel like talking about an actual episode today, so I figured I'd just talk about one particular aspect of an episode today, and that is Pinkie Pie in Filli Vanilli. And I know what you're probably thinking. You're thinking, oh, gonna beat this dead horse again. Everybody's talked about it, to no end. And actually, no. Today I am gonna kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and I'm actually gonna try and defend Pinkie Pie's actions in the episode because to me, I've not really seen anyone, when they've talked about this episode, really try to defend what Pinkie did. Everybody seems to pretty much be in agreement that it was terrible. So, I'm not trying to sort of say that you're wrong in thinking that, but I am just going to try and sort of show the other side of the coin and show the other side of the argument and give you a few other things to think about that maybe Pinkie Pie wasn't as bad as everybody thinks. So the first thing I want to address is a lot of people say that the two scenes where she's confronting Fluttershy, you might say, and is yelling at her rather obnoxiously and everything and reducing her to tears. A lot of people say that these scenes are pointless. They don't really add anything to the episode. The episode would have been just fine without them. And I don't really see that myself, certainly not in the case of the first scene, because I think it's important with what's going on in this episode that we understand what is going through Fluttershy's mind during this whole process. The fear that she has of performing in front of people. The anxiety and the fear that she feels from that kind of pressure and being worried about that she might mess up. But to quote the robot devil from Futurama, you can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me angry. So, instead of having Fluttershy actually just flat out say what she's thinking at this particular moment, they have Pinkie Pie do it in kind of what you might call a humorous kind of way. I think a lot of people didn't see it that way, but it was certainly an attempt at being humorous and kind of very sort of in the face. And certainly in the case of the first scene, I think that was the purpose of it. It was basically telling us exactly what Fluttershy was thinking throughout this process and why she didn't feel comfortable in performing in front of the crowd. As far as the second scene's concerned, I have a bit more difficulty defending that or giving it any kind of purpose. But I think maybe the purpose there is more just to give Fluttershy a reason to, completely panic at that particular moment because she'd just gone and had a bath and everything. She was back at home. She'd had a moment to calm down. It's just her friends in her house right there. There's no particular reason for her to flip out and panic and everything. And perhaps the story at that particular moment sort of called for, some kind of freak out by Fluttershy, and so Pinkie Pie gives her that reason. It's just sort of pushing things in the direction they need to go in order to sort of give her friends more of a reason to sort of hit things home for Fluttershy and, explain to her, it's really not as bad as you think. So, it's explaining how Fluttershy feels at this particular moment, and it's giving her a reason to sort of freak out a little bit more. The other thing people bring up quite a lot about these scenes is that it's inconsistent with the scene from Griff and the Brush Off, where Pinkie is going to prank Fluttershy, and then when Rainbow Dash says to her that it's Fluttershy, she's like, no, we can't prank Fluttershy because she's too sensitive. And people think this is inconsistent with that scene. And I would argue that, first of all, that is 3 seasons ago. A lot has happened in that time. But also, one of the themes of that episode was that the characters didn't really know each other particularly well at that particular moment. They weren't really sure what their personalities were, what their interests were, what they were like. And certainly it is very true when you first meet someone and you try to joke with them, you're a little bit sort of cautious sometimes. You're not entirely sure how they're going to take jokes, are they going to take them the wrong way or something, so you just need to be a little bit cautious. But then once you know people a little bit better, you feel more comfortable joking with them. Case in point would be Rainbow Dash in Dragon Quest when she's teasing Spike. I think that's what's going on there. She feels more comfortable joking around with Spike there. But it is also the problem that you can take things in completely the opposite direction, and you can take things too far sometimes when you feel like you've known someone for a while, and that perhaps when you take things too far, that obviously with any kind of joke, there is a point where people will draw the line and say, that's too much. Perhaps that's the mistake that Pinkie Pie is making here. She feels comfortable joking around when speaking with Fluttershy, but she takes things too far, as she actually says after that second scene to the other main characters. Was that too much? So yeah, I think that's what's really going on. I don't think it's inconsistent with Griffin the Brush-Off. I think it's just a fact that a lot has happened in their relationship with one another over 3 seasons. The other thing people say about Pinkie Pie's behaviour is they think she's been Flanderised. Now, to me, I'm not a huge fan of the way that people very loosely use the term Flanderised and also the term out of character. I think these two terms combined are putting characters in a position where they really just can't win. They do something that isn't typical of their character, they're acting out of character. They do something that is typical of their character, they're being Flanderised. Obviously there is a point where you draw the line, that they're doing something that isn't typical of their character. There's a point where you have to say it's out of character. They're doing something that is typical of their character. There's a point where you say they're being Flanderised. But I don't think people are really thinking about it very deeply when they use these terms a lot of the time. They're just throwing them out there without really knowing what they mean or what they're actually saying. The way Pinkie Pie acts in this episode, it seems fairly consistent with the way that she's behaved in the past and even in future episodes. So no, I don't think she's been Flanderised at all. And I don't think people really know what they mean or what they're saying when they say she's being Flanderised, really. Bring up an example in a later episode, testing 1 2 3, the Pinkie rap. I thought that that was actually, I don't want to say she's being Flanderised, but I thought it was maybe taking things a bit too far in terms of Pinkie's kind of random kind of nature. So I think I said something along the lines in my review of, it was just a bit too random, a bit too out of place, and a bit too over the top, even for Pinkie. And a lot of people came back to me and said, it's Pinkie Pie, she has no limits to her randomness and her over-the-topness. And over-the-topness, is that a word? Her just completely out of nowhere behaviour. There is no limit to that when it comes to Pinkie Pie. Okay, so what the hell was everyone's problem with her and Filli Vanilli? You can't just say that Pinkie's being Flanderised in that episode, but then also say that there's no limit to her over-the-top behaviour. You're basically saying, if you claim that there's no limit to her over-the-top, out-of-place behaviour, aren't you kind of like saying that she can't be Flanderised, basically? So why were you saying she was being Flanderised in Filli Vanilli? So yeah, it doesn't seem very consistent to me. The other thing I would say is that the reason why this show works is because these characters aren't perfect. They actually do have flaws, and they do things that are wrong. I'm certainly not saying that what Pinkie Pie did in this episode was right. The whole point is that it was wrong, and she's called out on it. Rarity goes to her, and as soon as she's finished yelling, and she hits her over the head with that scroll. She says, "Pinkie Pie, no, you can't do that." And then, in the later scene, they're all staring at her, thinking, "What the heck is wrong with you, Pinkie?" And Pinkie's like, "Well, is that too much?" And then a few seconds later, Rarity points out to her that she didn't actually say anything good about the way Fluttershy was performing, and Pinkie Pie very comedically yells back at her, "Oh, you were great!" So yeah, she does feel bad about what she did. She just got carried away, and she gets called out on it. Now, perhaps maybe the problem here is that this isn't a Pinkie Pie episode, and she doesn't learn anything from this experience, and it's not really the point of the episode, and it's not the lesson here. It's just something that happens in it. So that perhaps is maybe the problem here. And perhaps also there's nothing particularly likeable about the way Pinkie Pie acts after it's all happened. She doesn't feel any remorse or, really make any major kind of effort to apologise. So I think perhaps that is the problem. It's not the scenes themselves that are the problem. It's Pinkie Pie and the other characters' reaction to it. It isn't justified enough. It isn't given enough of a purpose or, made out or made clear enough that this was the wrong thing to do. So in that sense, I can perhaps see the problem that people have. It's not the scenes themselves, it's the reaction to those scenes. And personally, it didn't bother me too much because I found these scenes to be quite amusing and quite enjoyable comedically. And I think perhaps maybe a lot of people's problem is the fact that she reduces Fluttershy to tears, and a lot of people just don't like seeing that because Fluttershy is a very popular character. So perhaps for me personally, the problem, it's not a problem for me because I'm just not the biggest Fluttershy fan in the world. She's probably my least favourite of the main six, and her being reduced to tears, I sort of, maybe this is unkind of me to think, but I'm sort of thinking to myself, toughen up a little bit, Fluttershy. She's just sort of saying things a little bit obnoxiously. It's not really something to get hugely upset about. And one last thing I want to talk about is, just for the sake of argument, I'll accept, that Pinkie Pie's behaviour is terrible. It adds nothing to the episode or anything. I can kind of accept that on some kind of level. But this is still a good episode, even with those scenes. There's still another 20 odd minutes of good stuff in this episode, and a great lesson, and great development from the characters of both Fluttershy and, to a lesser extent, Rarity as well, I think. And yet these scenes with Pinkie Pie, it's all anyone ever talks about. Try and look at the actual episode here, guys. The rest of the episode, rather. And because we actually do have a good episode here, why not focus on that a little bit more? So yeah, that's just basically why Pinkie Pie and Filli Vanilli didn't bother me too much, and just a few other sort of factors of those scenes that I think people should probably think about a little bit. Again, I'm not saying you're wrong for not liking Pinkie Pie in this episode, but there are just a few other factors to those scenes that you should just maybe think about a little bit. That's that thing, guys. See you soon.